Alright, hello there, thrill seekers. And today's musical intro is a bit of a golden oldie. I decided to reuse a musical intro that I recorded about a year ago because I was playing the song Flying Saucer Attack, which seemed kind of appropriate for today's video. Because last weekend, March 4th, I was at Aliencon in Pasadena, where I got this nice photo op. That's me and my wife with Giorgio Tsoukalos, I'm not sure exactly how to pronounce his last name, at Aliencon. He's the guy from Ancient Aliens, the guy with the hair. And I also bought his t-shirt, Tsoukolicious. Tsoukolicious is what it says. Sorry, you couldn't hear me. Anyway, it's a little side interest I have. I guess the kids call it side hustle. I guess a side hustle means you're making money off of it, and I'm not making money off of it. But at one point, I had thought about writing a book about UFOs and kind of making a Zen connection with UFOs. And I decided, since I'd gone to the Aliencon last weekend, I decided maybe I would do on this video, I would tell you my favorite UFO story and why it's my favorite UFO story and why I'll probably never make it in the world of UFO research because my ideas about the whole thing are a bit too weird because this is my favorite UFO story. My favorite UFO story of all time I actually first came across while browsing through this book, UFOs and Popular Culture, which is still my favorite book on UFOs, and it's not a book anybody really knows about. I don't remember. I think I came across this in some used bookstore and just randomly, and also very randomly happened to come across this entry called it's called the Eagle River Pancake Tale, about Joe Simonton, a 54-year-old plumber from Eagle River, Wisconsin, who saw a UFO. They call him a plumber. I've actually heard him called a chicken farmer. He might have been a plumber and chicken farmer at the same time. But since there is a very nice film made of Joe Simonton back in 1961 actually telling his story of his UFO encounter, and I found it on YouTube, I thought I would let Joe Simonton himself tell you his weird UFO story. So let's hear the story from Joe Simonton himself. So here goes. Here's Joe telling his UFO story.
Right here is where this flying saucer, this UFO landed. Right here about where I'm standing. And it was a big, huge thing, and I wondered what the heck it was. I looked out the window, and that's when I first saw this thing coming straight down, just like an elevator. And first I thought the roof went off of my house, and I thought, no, the roof is green, and this is bright. What the heck is it? So I rushed out to see what it was, and by that time there was a hatchway opening up in the top of it, just like the trunk of your car. And in there stood a little man, I say a little man, about 5 foot tall, holding up a jug or a container, and he motioned he wanted to drink. He motioned for water. So I walked up to him to get this jug, and I looked at his eyes, and they were so penetrating that I had to look away. So I went to the basement to get this water, and I thought, well, they want water, so I'll take it up to them and see what happens. And with that, I brought the water up, and he was looking at me when I first came out of the basement. But I didn't look at his face until I got right up to him. Then I looked up, and I handed the jug up with both hands, and I had that same look in his eyes, a sort of a penetrating look. And he gave me a salute with the back of his hand, a gesture of thanks, I presume. And then, well, I gave him my salute. What am I going to do? So, I noticed this little man, same size of a man, right to the right side of the hatchway, cooking these pancakes, which I have one here yet. He was frying these pancakes, and I pointed to him and made a gesture like eating. I thought maybe I'd get a conversation out of him. Nobody was saying anything. But he He didn't say a word. He just reached over and he got a handful of them, 4 of them, and he handed them down to me. And they were hot and greasy. And this man cooking these pancakes, it was on a square grill-like concern. I couldn't see any flame, but it seemed to be very hot. There was smoke coming from it. And if that was their food, God help them, because I took a bite of one of them, and it tasted like a piece of cardboard. And if that's what they lived on, no wonder they're small. And with that, he reached up and he closed this hatch with a heavy thud click like when it latched. And you couldn't a bit more see where that hatch was than you could see a hole in my hand. And with that, the thing started to raise just like it came down. Everything was timed perfect. It went up about 20 feet. It tilted at 45 degrees straight south and shot off. And within 2 or 3 seconds, it was out of sight. Well, there I stood in the driveway with a handful of greasy pancakes and my mouth open, wondering what the heck I saw, what had happened.
Okay, so that's a weird story, and there's actually a little bit more to that. Here's the follow-up to the story. What ensued when Simonton told his story has been called a local wonder, a national joke, and a food fight. His reputation as honest and genuine gained him considerable local support. On the national level, the U.S. Air Force, the National Investigations Committee on Aerial Phenomena, NICAP, the Aerial Phenomena Research Organization, and Project Blue Book, that was the committee that at the time was a part of the Air Force that investigated UFOs, all became involved. Various samples of the pancakes, minus one cardboard-tasting bite that Joe Simonton took, you heard him talk about that, were sent away for analysis. One report from the Food and Drug Administration returned the verdict that the article is an ordinary pancake of terrestrial origin. NICAP, for its part, was reluctant to investigate due to the contact nature of the claim and its sensitive and difficult task of presenting believable accounts of encounters. Critical reviews of NICAP's head, U.S. Marine Corps Major Donald Kehoe, were rampant in UFO-related publications, but the modesty of Simonton's claim ultimately won him the status of having a close encounter of the third kind. That's when you actually meet an occupant of an extraterrestrial craft. Skeptics still maintained that he had merely experienced a hallucination followed by a delusion. The question is, does this generally produce pancakes? I love the way they put that in there. And why this is my favorite UFO story, I'll tell you. Well, I went to that UFO Con, Aliencon in Pasadena last weekend, and I can tell you that the people that were there, I didn't really talk to anybody there, but I got the impression just based on the kind of presentations that were given and some of the ones I attended and some of the exhibits that were on display there, that sightings like Joe Simonton's would not have been on the top of the list for most of the people who were at that conference, at that convention. Because I think what people are mostly interested in are the idea that UFOs are sort of like spaceships from another planet, which means they are metal and plastic contraptions with nuts and bolts in them and manned by, or whatever, they're not men obviously, but whatever, they're peopled, I don't know, thinged. They're little guys in there who are creatures from another planet. They're basically like, we sent Apollo missions to the moon with astronauts in them to pick up rocks and look for stuff on the moon. And they're just very, very high-tech, very, very advanced versions of that. That's what they want UFOs to be. That's what they're looking for. One of the presentations I saw was by Jeremy Corbell and, George Knapp, George Knapp was the first person to interview Bob Lazar, who was the first guy to actually publicly expose Area 51 before anybody knew there was such a thing as Area 51. Now the government has admitted that there is an Area 51 near Las Vegas, and I've actually been there. I drove up to the gate, not inside Area 51, but I drove up to the gate of Area 51 and looked at it like a lot of people do. You can do that. So he was one who broke open that story. George Knapp was a TV reporter in Las Vegas at the time. And, they're looking for that kind of thing. But I think that, okay, I'm a Zen Buddhist, and I've been practicing Zen Buddhism for, nearly 40 years, or, God, now I just had a birthday. My birthday was yesterday, so I guess as of yesterday, it's been more than 40 years. Ziggy's walking around looking for UFOs of his own. Anyway, so I've been practicing this Buddhism stuff for a long time, and one of the things that I have learned from my practice and experience with Buddhism is that this world that we are living in right now is nothing like what we are taught that it is. We all grew up with a materialistic, physicalist paradigm. I don't know, I always get tripped up on these big words. There's an idea of what the world is that we were kind of fed by society, by our parents, by our teachers, by everybody, by TV, by everything, by the internet, everything we're exposed to of what this world is. And it's so ingrained in us that most of us, myself included, have a very, very difficult time seeing things any other way. And when I say seeing things any other way, that includes actually physically seeing things any other way than the way that we have been taught to see things. Now, when you do a practice of meditation, a lot of that breaks down. I don't know if it ever breaks down completely, at least not for most people. But if you do a practice long enough, most of us get to the point where first we start to question it deeply, and then we might have a kind of a breakthrough experience. I think a lot of us get these kind of breakthrough experiences where we'll all at once come to see, and again, I mean, in a sense, physically see. Physically is kind of a weird word to use here, but I'll use it for the time being. But you see in a unmistakable way that it's not the way you thought it was. Now, phenomena like UFOs, I think, are one of many pieces of evidence. I'm searching for words. They're not really the right words. That point to an area that we don't ordinarily experience because it's outside of that framework that we've been taught to experience the world in. I'm giving you the framework of the YouTube, what do you call this thing? Anyway, the framework that you're looking at me in right now. We've been taught to experience the world within a certain framework, sort of like you're experiencing my head within a certain framework. And we're not taught to experience the world outside of that framework. But there is an entire universe that exists outside of that framework. And it is entirely possible that there are intelligences, beings perhaps, who operate outside of that framework and occasionally interact or attempt to interact with human beings. And I think maybe part of what the UFO phenomenon are beings who are interacting with us outside of that framework that we've been taught to understand the world in. And those weird cases of UFOs that don't fit in. See, the cases like the Bob Lazar case. I don't know how many of you are familiar with UFO stuff, but a case like the Bob Lazar case is a very appealing case to the people who want UFOs to be nuts and bolts things. So like the short version of the Bob Lazar case is he claims to have been recruited by clandestine people within the U.S. intelligence agencies to help back engineer a captured UFO that they had in Area 51. And then he was somehow kicked out of the program, and now he's become kind of a whistleblower. So he says he's seen actual craft and actually been inside them when they've done test flights of them. So he's very appealing to that nuts and bolts kind of person. And so they love that kind of a story. But they don't like a Joe Simonton type of story about a weird guy who hands some pancakes and then flies off and just looks bizarre and doesn't make any sense. But see, I think those kind of UFO stories, the Joe Simonton kind of UFO stories, are probably closer to the truth of what's going on. That if there are these intelligences that are outside of the realm of our understanding, that they're probably behaving in ways that the rational mind of that's used to understanding things in a very physical framework that's, very rigid, isn't going to be able to comprehend, and it's going to come across very weird. But I think these beings probably do interact with people in a physical framework sometimes. This is just my speculation. And of course, I've never encountered a UFO, except those of you who watch my videos will know that I did see one, at least some kind of object in the air that I couldn't identify and that I showed you. Actually, it happened when I was making a video and I pointed the camera at it and showed you what it was. It might have been one of those Elon Musk satellites. I don't know, but it was pretty weird. Anyway, the only UFO researcher that I know of, there's two UFO researchers I know of who investigated in this fashion, and the one who does it best is Jacques Vallée. The other is John Keel, and I haven't read too much of John Keel's stuff, so I'll just mention him by name, so, that's one of them. But the one who I've read more of is Jacques Vallée, and the one book of Jacques Vallée's that I've read cover to cover is Messengers of Deception, because this is the one that really, I think I talked about it on this video channel once before. It's about UFO cults and contacts, and contains, remember those guys who all wore Nike shoes? They were down in San Diego. What was the name of the cult? Heaven's Gate, I think they were called, and they all committed suicide at once. Well, this book was written long before that incident happened, but he went and investigated those guys before they put on the Nike shoes and committed suicide, and kind of talked about them and talked about how he thought they were going to do something very tragic someday, and they did about 10 years after this book was written. So he was on to them before, but he talks about that, and one of the books in which he talks about it most is this one, Passport to Magonia, which I have not finished. But Passport to Magonia is slightly disappointing to me, because about half the book is about his theories, and then half of it's just kind of a rote listing of different weird contexts, so about half the book is taken up. But he does tell the Joe Simonton story. He has about a paragraph of the Joe Simonton story in Passport to Magonia. But he, unlike a lot of UFO guys, doesn't start with the Roswell incident in 1947, the flying saucer crash in Roswell, New Mexico in 1947, which I don't know if you know about that, but go look it up if you don't know. Most UFO stuff starts then. He goes all the way back into prehistory and stuff and kind of investigates it there, because he says this is an ongoing phenomenon that really goes way back and doesn't start in 1947 or with the flying saucer scares of the 50s. It goes way back, and I think he's right. It's a very interesting thing. But the other thing I should say, as a good Zen Buddhist, as a good follower of Dogen, is that part of what we do in Zen Buddhism is we talk about this world, about common things, about ordinary things, and we try not to get too sucked into the paranormal, the weird, those exciting oddball things that that get people excited about unusual phenomenon and all that and all that stuff. My teacher, Nishijima Roshi, was kind of critical of my interest in this sort of thing, and I don't know if he was alive today and he knew I was making a video about it, he probably wouldn't be too favorable about it. But it's a side interest of mine, and I talk about it a bit cautiously. I think I don't think it's supernatural, but I also think the sort of natural explanations of it's aliens from another planet is a bit too easy. Whatever it is may be aliens from another planet, but it's not guys in little spaceships like an Apollo mission sort of thing coming down to study us like that. I don't think it's like that. I think it's something much stranger and something that I'm not sure we'd understand it even if the aliens came and explained it to us. I think it may be that level of it may be so outside of our usual way of understanding things as human beings that the Buddhists might understand it. But I don't think a lot of these researchers and people who are looking into it, part of the reason it baffles them so much is because they're completely misunderstanding what it is, because they don't have the right framework in which to understand it, which may be also why the government. I think there probably is stuff that our governments know that they are hiding from the public, and there's probably good reason, because part of what a government's job is to do is protect the people from possible threats. And so they are probably in possession of evidence that there is a technologically, or what seems to be a technologically superior intelligence at work, in our airspace, that they have no idea what it is. And there are people out there who think of, I don't know, Eisenhower made a treaty with the aliens and all this stuff. I've run into people who believe all sorts of things like that, and that our governments, have ongoing, trade agreements, and that they're supplying people to have experiments and all this stuff, and all this. I don't think it's anything like that. I think the government, if they are in possession of any information on these beings and whatever they are, they're just as baffled as we are. And what they are keeping from us is the fact that they do know a little bit more than the general public does, but they don't know what it is. And they don't want to let on to the general public that they don't know what it is, because that would make them look like they don't have any control over the situation, which is exactly the case. They don't have any control of the situation. They don't know what it is, and they don't want the public to know that there's something out there, and they know it's out there, and they don't know what it is. So there's my little UFO theory for you. And I just think it's interesting. It's not my main area of interest, but it's something that I can go off on every once in a while and get geeky about. So I just thought I'd share that with you, and share with you my picture. If anybody knows how to get me, I've been on the History Channel as an expert in an expert in Eastern religions before, on some show they did. This was like 10 years ago, and I never actually got to see the show. But if anybody knows how to get me on ancient aliens as an expert in Eastern religions, I would love to go on that. So if you have connections, let me know. Hit me up. I'll give you the email address on the screen. There, you can write me. So there you go. Also, if you want to support me while I'm waiting for the Ancient Aliens to contact me, Ancient Aliens TV show to contact me, you can go to the URL that you're seeing on the screen below, which is hardcorezen.info/donate. That is hardcorezen.info/donate. There you will find links to my Patreon and PayPal accounts. Those are my main and usually only ways to make a living, and I appreciate your support. But as always, this is offered for free, so you don't got to support me if you don't want to support me. We will see you next time. Have a good time all the time. Bye. Ooh. Hey, Ziggy. There's Ziggy. He's been sitting right here while I've been making the video, haven't you, Ziggy? All right, well, I'm going to go edit the video, okay? Thank you for sitting and waiting while I've been making the video. Bye.